In this module, we will discuss about the accounts and records rules, which means we will discuss about the list of accounts or records to be maintained under the goods and services tax. As required under any law, under GST as well, there are list of records or information that requires to be maintained. Let us quickly understand what are these records that needs to be maintained by the registered dealers. First and the foremost is the register of goods produced. This record needs to be maintained by the manufacturer of goods. This record should contain details of goods manufactured in a factory or a production house. It should show quantitative details of raw materials or services used in the manufacture, and as well as quantitative details of goods so manufactured, including the details like waste and byproducts thereof. Next is the details of the purchase register. This should include the details of all the purchases made within a tax period for manufacturing of goods or provision of services or for trading of goods. It should also include details like name and addresses of the suppliers, as well as the registration numbers and any other details in regards to the purchases. Next is the details of the sales. Such register needs to be maintained by all the registered dealers, and it should contain the details of sales made within a tax period. It should contain details like name and address of the client, registration number, quantity details, pricing, and any such further details which helps in showing the actual value of the sales. Next is the details of the input tax credit availed. This register should be maintained by all the people who are claiming input tax credit, and it should contain details of input tax credit availed for a given period of tax. Next is the details of the stock register. This register should contain details of correct stock or inventory available at any given point of time. It should contain details like the opening balance, the receipts, the supplies, the details of goods lost or stolen, destroyed or written off or disposed of by way of gift or free samples, and the balance closing stock, including the breakdown between the raw material, finished goods, scrap, and wastage thereof. Another important details to be maintained is the details of output tax liability. In this, the details like the GST liability outstanding that needs to be adjusted against the input credit or against the actual cash paid should be maintained. Next is the output tax paid detail. In this, the register should maintain the details of GST paid for a particular tax period. And lastly, any other accounts specified by the government by way of a notification. In such cases, these accounts needs to be maintained by the registered dealers. While we looked at the list of accounts or documents or information to be maintained, it is also important to know what is the period of retention for these documents or information. So under the GST law, all the accounts and records needs to be maintained for a period of 5 years from the last date of filing of annual return of the following year. Now, let us look at the list of accounts or records or information that needs to be maintained by special category of people like the agents. Agents will have to maintain details like particulars of authorization received from each principal for supply of goods or services. It also needs to maintain details such as description, value, and quantity of goods or services received and supplied. It needs to have the details of all the accounts furnished to every principal. And finally, details of taxes paid on receipts or on supply of goods or services effected. Now, let us look at the details or accounts that needs to be maintained by the works contract The works contractor needs to maintain details like names and address of the clients, the description value and quantity of goods or services received and utilized under the works contract, the details of the payment received, and finally the details of name and address of the suppliers. With this, we end our module on input service distributors. In the next module, we will look at the e-commerce operators under GST.